As you know, as Isabella pointed out, today is the National Day of Awareness of MMIWGP, or Murder Missing Indigenous Women, Girls, and People. In some cases, they say MMIWR, Murder Missing Indigenous Women and Relatives. See, there we go. Most of you are probably familiar with this symbol, right? The handprint over the face, the red handprint. So a red handprint over the mouth has become the symbol of a growing movement about the murdered and missing Indigenous women. It stands for all the missing sisters whose voices are not heard. It stands for the silence of the media and the law enforcement in the midst of all this crisis. It stands for the oppression and the subjugation of Native women who are now rising up to say, no more stolen sisters. And that's a hashtag you can use today. There are several. Today is the National Day of Awareness. The reason why it was May 5th, in case you didn't know, it's because it's the birthday of Hannah Harris. She was a 21-year-old Native American woman who went missing and was murdered on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. And you'll notice that a lot of people are wearing red. And the reason why we wear red is for a lot of our tribal nations, red is the only color that spirits can see. So when we wear red, we are hoping to call back the missing spirits of our women and children so we can lay them to rest. And so that's why red is the symbol of this day. That's why the hand across the mouth is the symbol of this day. And as we continue, I just want to point out some statistics. You've probably heard all of these before, and we'll be revisiting some of them again. 5,712. That is the number of known incidents of missing and murdered Native women, Native American and Alaska Native women of 2016. There's another little sentence underneath there we'll go into a little bit later, but right now only 116 cases of those 5,712 were logged into the Department of Justice database. 67%, that's the number of cases between 2005 2009 that U.S. attorneys declined to prosecute of Native community matters involving sexual abuse. 96%. On some reservations, the number of sexual violence against Native women committed by non-natives, 96%. So more than 4 in 5 American Indians and Alaska Native women and men have experienced violence in their lifetime, and more than 1 in 3 experienced violence in the past year. According to a new report from the National Institute of Justice, they funded that study. Here are some more statistics for you. You'll see the median age is 29. How many cases with a status unknown? 98. How many cases of murdered Indigenous women? 280. 128 were cases of missing Indigenous women, and 506 were missing and murdered Indigenous women and girl cases that were identified across 71 selected urban cities. Native Americans today face some extraordinary challenges. These statistics from the Urban Indian Health Institute were compiled from a survey of 71 U.S. cities in 2016. The numbers speak for themselves. Native American women make up a significant portion of the missing and murdered cases. Not only is the murder rate 10 times higher than the national average for women living on the reservation, but murder is the 3rd leading cause of death for Native women. And what's so startling about this is that Native people only make up about 2% of the U.S. overall population. The Urban Indian Health Institute reports that the youngest MMIW victim was a baby, less than a year old. And the oldest victim was an 83-year-old. And I also want to take this moment to point out, since violence doesn't always end in homicide, these numbers are far from being able to reflect the magnitude of this reality and the trauma it causes. No safety, no justice. We're going to go into that a bit, and you'll see the slide again later on. You'll see that it says denied tribal jurisdiction authority over non-Indian offenders, rapists, sex traffickers, and predators. Denied resources to support a healthcare response, shelter and safe housing, and advocacy services. And it's a culture of dehumanization and tolerance for rape, trafficking, abuse, and murder of Native women. And like I said, we'll see what the other side is later. I want to talk a little bit more about the denied tribal jurisdiction authority. If you are a Native woman, you should be aware of Oliphant versus Suquamish Indian tribe of 1978. So this was a United States Supreme Court case that decided that the Indian tribal courts have no criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians. I'm going to let that sink in for a bit. We have no criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians. And this case was decided on March 6, 1978 with a 6-2 majority. And in an article published by Columbia Law School, Brenda Toynetta's Pipestem, who is an Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian tribal member who serves as an associate judge on the Cherokee Supreme Court, stated, "Without full jurisdiction over their lands, tribal nations are unable to protect their citizens and property from the criminal acts of non-Indians." What's happening in the MMIW situation is non-Indians have found that out. And now they are going on to reservations to prey on our women, knowing that we cannot prosecute them. So support for full tribal jurisdiction rings out throughout Indian country. And for those of you who do not know, Indian country is a legal term. I'm going to be using it a lot tonight, and it's going to come into play very, very soon. The General Assembly of the National Congress of American Indians adopted a resolution that states, in part, "The National Congress of American Indians does hereby call on the United States government to expand inherent tribal criminal jurisdiction over all persons committing any crime in their Indian country in a manner that ensures the defendants have the same due process protections as required under the tribal law." And also the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act of 2013. So tribal leaders across Indian country have made overturning Oliphant a priority in restoring our jurisdiction. And so that's something I'm always looking for whenever I look at new candidates who are running for office. I want to see where they stand on the Oliphant case. Now, this picture, you'll notice people protesting. It says, "Include Alaska, Native Women in VAWA." VAWA stands for the Violence Against Women Act. So VAWA, we'll get into that soon, but what happens is in Alaska, something similar to the Oliphant case happened. They have the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, also known as ANCSA. And so this came at the tail end of the termination era of federal Indian policy, which was around the mid-1940s to mid-1960s. And it came to fruition after being in the works for several years. Now, the termination era was designed to abolish tribes and assimilate individual Indians. Now, Alaska has always been treated differently because of this 1971 Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. Because in exchange of 40 million acres of land and about $1 billion, tribes forfeited reservations and the notion of Indian country to form native corporations. In 2013, VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, Section 910, used the legal term Indian country. So in Alaska, only the Metlakatla Indian tribe from Alaska is included in that 2013 law. The rest of Alaska remains under the old law. So while that protects women and people of domestic abuse in Indian country, out of all the federally recognized tribes in Alaska, only one of them is viewed to be as in Indian country. That means all of our brothers and sisters in Alaska are not protected under the Violence Against Women Act. Now, Lloyd Miller, who is an attorney who works on Indian rights and tribal jurisdiction, he says, what is being said is that an Alaska village only has the authority to issue a protective order if that man is a member of the tribe. They can't if he's from a neighboring tribe. Why would we not want to have Alaska villages have all the tools to protect women from domestic violence? Literally, our hands are tied. We can only prosecute people that are of our own tribal nation or people that were domestic partners involved in some sort of domestic abuse. And of course, there are opponents against this exemption, as there should be, and they've been fighting for it. And I do have some good news. They did create the reauthorization of VAWA. It passed in the House on March 17th, 2021. And it goes to the state next in consideration. Now, the bill will give tribes in the pilot project criminal jurisdiction over members and non-members in villages as long as the community is at least 75% Alaska Native. Why this is so important is because a matter of minutes can mean life or death for these women. And it's unequal protection under the law for any vulnerable part of the population. And now we're going to go on to the dehumanizing of Native women. I'm sure you're all familiar with this poster. A lot of you probably grew up watching it or have recently watched it. I believe it's available on Disney Plus. It's perhaps probably one of the most well-known movies about Native Americans. Shocking, I know. This is Pocahontas. It was made in 1995. It was produced by Disney. And in this movie, it follows the 18-year-old daughter of the Powhatan chief as she falls in love with a white settler named John Smith. And she basically sacrifices herself to save him from being killed by her father, which we found out later in reality is a ritual. It's what the Powhatans would do. The film paints the settlers as very ignorant, as people who don't realize that Native people are human beings. And so through the course of the movie, they realize that we really are human. And it was just a big misunderstanding. So in the end, the noble white man saves Powhatan by jumping in front of a bullet, and he and Pocahontas share a sweet moment before he's whisked off to England. That's how the movie ends. Unfortunately, the real-life story of Pocahontas is not anything like the Disney version. Pocahontas' real name was Matoaka, and she was only 10 years old when she met John Smith and the settlers when they first arrived in Jamestown. She never had any relationship with John Smith. At 14, it said that she was married to Kocoum, and she had a child with him. And soon, when she was 15 or 16, she was kidnapped by the colonists as a pawn against her father. And so she was kidnapped and basically held in captivity, where some reports say that she was raped and gave birth to a second child. And then she was forced to marry John Rolfe. Of course, in the history books, she wanted to marry John Rolfe. And then, of course, she did go to England to prove to the English elites that she was not being abused. And once again, according to the different stories, she became sick and died. And in some circles, they believe that she was poisoned and killed. But she did die at the age of 20. So once again, her story begins at the age of 10. So what Disney did was they took this tragic life story of a real person, and a lot of people will say she's the first MMIW that we know of, and they framed it as a love story for the ages, right? To stroke the white savior complex. And we see a lot of movies about the white savior complex. Let's be very clear. But also, if you notice in the cartoon, in this illustration right here, she's overly sexualized. And she continues to be so. And it contributes to the MMIW genocide happening in Canada and the United States. And it also teaches our young Native women to equate our bodies as objects. And it also let our oppressors be our lovers. I don't know about you, but growing up, Pocahontas was the nickname everyone called me and my sister, especially in my small town where we went to a school that was predominantly white. So Pocahontas has a lot of negative connotation because of the Disney movie and not because of the actual person. And so this is a picture of the real Pocahontas. This is when she was married to John Rolfe, and this was a painting that was done of her. As you will see that her name is, they say it correctly, Matoaka, but they also changed her name to Rebecca. And she was the daughter of the mighty Prince Powhatan, Emperor of the Virginias, converted and baptized. Keep that in mind, we're going to revisit that soon. In the Christian faith, and wife to John Rolfe. And so now we're going back to that seesaw that we saw earlier. So we talked about what no justice and no safety looks like. So what safety and justice looks like is that Indian tribes will have full authority and the rights and the resources to protect Native women. Also, there's the belief that women are sacred. One of my favorite stories about my people that my father shared with me was when the Cherokee met with British delegates, Chief Attakushla was told to bring his council And so he did. He brought his beloved men and women, those who exceeded in war, in wisdom, and deed. And when he walked into this room with the British delegates, he saw everyone in the red coats and the wigs, and he noticed there were no women. So he says to them, "Where are your women?" And the British delegates reply, "Oh, we do not let women weigh in on matters of state." And Chief Atakashla turned to us and said in Cherokee, "We cannot trust them. They're only thinking with half their brains." So a woman is sacred. A woman is an equal part. There's a reason why women don't go to ceremonies when they're on their cycles. And it's not because they're dirty, which is what a lot of people like to believe. It's because at that point we are more powerful than any medicine that could be in that ceremony. So women are sacred. We are life givers. No one comes into this world without passing through the body of a woman. And so we have to start believing that women are a sacred object. And of course, safety and justice also includes the support of tribal families and nations. So here's that number again. I want to just really point this out. It's 5,712 cases of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls who were reported in 2016. And only 116 of them were logged into the Department of Justice database because of jurisdiction. However, I am a hopeful person, and I like to say that change is happening. We saw this recently, right here. This makes me very happy. This, my friends, is Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland. Her legislative work is important because, as she stated, there is absolutely no reason why Native women and girls should have to fear that no one will act if they are harmed. And then this is a story that Secretary Haaland has told, and I want to share it with you. But she says, if you go to the Capitol Rotunda today, you will find life-sized oil paintings that depict the so-called beginning of this country. They illustrate the ethnic cleansing and the conquest of Native Americans, including depictions of colonizers baptizing Pocahontas in a Christian church. And of course, fearful, unclothed Native people running from the Europeans when they arrived on our land. And so remember when I said pay attention to the baptism of Pocahontas? It's in the rotunda. You will see this picture. What's also interesting about the rotunda is on that very same wall, you will see this picture. And this is probably the famous picture of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It's a document, as we all know, that says all men are created equal. However, only 30 lines below that, the founding fathers referred to Native Americans as merciless Indian savages. So to put this history into perspective, it's been 243 years since the Declaration of Independence was signed, 230 years since the first United States Congress met, 194 years since these paintings in the rotunda were hung. And this shows just how long the murdered and missing Indigenous women, this crisis has been going on, unnoticed and even normalized in our culture. This gives me hope. So this is Deb and Charisse. I don't know them personally, but I like to think that we would be best friends if I did. So Democrats Deb Haaland, who is a Laguna Pueblo member representing New Mexico, and Charisse Davids, a Ho-Chunk Nation member representing Kansas. They were the first Native American women elected to Congress in 2018. The first in 2018. And in the work that I do, especially in film, television, and stage, I always like to point out that if you are celebrating the first of anything in the year 2021, then you are too late. We should not be celebrating the first. And I'm hoping there will be the day where this is a normal situation and we don't have to celebrate the first anymore. So once again, going back to the numbers, up until 2018, it had taken Native women over 240 years to finally hold a congressional seat. And they can finally start advocating for the murdered and missing Indigenous women. So we are finally being represented, and our women are no longer being silent. So these are some important bills that have been passed. There's Savannah's Act. Now, Savannah's Act is named for Savannah LaFontaine Greywind, who was a 22-year-old woman who was brutally killed and whose 8-month-old fetus was cut from her womb. Now, this act was unanimously passed by the Senate in March after it was reintroduced by Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski. Now, just so you know, the bill was originally penned and introduced in 2017 by then Senator Heidi Heitkamp. So what Savannah Act does, as you can see on here, but basically it requires the Justice Department to report statistics on missing or murdered Native Americans. It develops guidelines for responses in cases of missing and murdered Native Americans. It conducts research to tribes and Native American organizations, and it provides training to law enforcement agencies on how to record tribal enrollment for victims in federal databases. So hopefully that 116, that number that's reported to the Department of Justice, we'll see more reported to the Department of Justice. And so this is a big deal for us. The Savannah Act is a huge win for us. We also had another huge win. We had the Not Invisible Act. So the Not Invisible Act complements the Savannah Act by aiming to increase the coordination efforts between the federal government, right? The federal government, the law enforcement, tribal governments, and tribal leaders. And it's basically to reduce the violence against Native Americans. In particular, this bill mandates that the Department of the Interior designate an official within the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and we know who our new Secretary of the Department of Interior is. And so Deb Haaland will be doing this. We'll talk a little bit more about that soon. But basically, they get to designate an official within the BIA to coordinate prevention efforts, grants, and programs related to missing Indians and the murder and human trafficking of Indians. Now, additionally, the Interior and the Justice Department must establish a joint commission that will develop recommendations on how to combat violence against Native peoples. So now we're able to hopefully stop it before it happens. And as Angel Charlie, who is Executive Director of the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, said in a statement, "We have arrived at a moment in history. The signing of these two crucial bills into law will commemorate hundreds of years of advocacy. We are looking forward to seeing these bills become law because our women and children deserve these enhanced protections." Now, on October 10th, 2020, these two bills were signed into law to help address the crisis of our MMIW in the United States. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic is worsening this already dangerous situation because it's magnifying the crisis of violence and also the murdered and missing Indigenous women, and shining a spotlight on the dangerous gaps in the U.S. law and the disparities Indigenous people face on a daily basis as a result of the United States' failure to adequately address their well-being for more than 200 years. These new laws represent an long overdue first step by the United States in responding to this crisis. And it's finally fulfilling the federal trust responsibility to assert tribal governments in safeguarding the lives of Indian women. Now, on April 1st, 2021, Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, I love saying that, it never gets old, announced the formation of a new Missing and Murdered Unit, the MMU, within the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Justice Services, so it's the BIA-OJS, to provide leadership and direction for cross-departmental and interagency work involving missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. The MMU will help put the full weight of the federal government into investigating these cases and marshal law enforcement resources across the federal agencies and throughout Indian country. They will put the full weight of the federal government into investigating these cases. And Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland states, "Violence against Indigenous women is a crisis that has been underfunded for decades. Far too often, murdered and missing persons cases in Indian country go unsolved and unaddressed, leaving families and communities devastated. This new MMU unit will provide the resources and leadership to prioritize these cases and coordinate resources to hold peoples accountable and to keep our communities safe and provide closure for these families." Now, if you feel compelled to help, if you're asking yourself, what can I do? This is one of my favorite things. One, educate yourself, right? If you feel compelled to help fight this fight, then you need to educate yourself. Learn as much as you can about the problem. Study not only the official statistics offered by the law enforcement and justice agency, but look deeper into the smaller studies, the ones that tribes are doing. And you will see the different types of information that's being gathered. And you'll find out that our native tribes gather more information on their own than the law agencies. I know most of you are shocked by that statement. So basically, the more education you have about the truth, the more you can discover ways to make the high statistics go down. The next step is educate others. For far too long, the problems of violence, kidnapping, human trafficking, modern slavery, and murder in Native communities has been swept under the rug. It's been ignored or dismissed. You hardly ever see it on the news unless it's your local news network. It's not being covered by the national news. Our women and their stories are being silenced. And it's time that we teach others about what's happening and address this issue. There's so many people in what we now call America who do not even know that this is an issue. And we have to let them know. And of course, one of the things you can do is you can learn the proper hashtags, and you can get involved in spreading the word on social media. As you know, for a lot of us, we didn't get our information about Standing Rock from the news. We got it from Facebook Live. And once again, it's amazing what social media has done for Native communities and how we can get the word out. And so take part in the social media front. Take part in local or national events that stand up for the rights of women. Attempt to raise money or find a way to serve them. And basically call out prejudice when you see it. You know, if you see something, say something. And of course, show up. Be an active member of your community. As Isabel stated earlier in her land acknowledgement, you are on Indigenous land. I don't care where you are in this country, at this moment, you are standing on Indigenous land. Find out whose land that was. And I can guarantee that those people are still alive and still thriving. Go into that community and find out what they need and how you can be of service. It's one of the ways to acknowledge that our people are still here and we are not going anywhere. Of course, you know, I always suggest doing more hands-on volunteering, help in any way that you can. Of course, if you have a service you can provide, even better. In the donation world, in the fundraising world, they call it the 3 T's, which is you can donate your time. And for some of us, that's the best we can do. And I understand and respect that. You can donate your talent. So that means whatever you have to offer, whatever active service you can give. And of course, you can donate a treasure. In this case, you can donate money, or you can help them raise money. But find out what is happening in your area and how you can be of service. And then, of course, find the helpers and support them. Support them with your time, your treasures, your talent. And then I have also, if you can't find the helpers, become one, because you can. So if you can't find them, be them. And then, of course, the big call is run for office. After Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland won, we saw an uptake in how many Native women were running for office for all the different parties. And that made such a huge difference in what is being happening with these acts that are being passed, and also with the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. And so there are many ways that you can help promote the justice for Native women and help stem the tide of the missing and murdered. And one of the biggest ways is showing up, speaking out, and supporting the people that are doing the work. And this can be as simple as calling or writing letters to your representatives, finding out which candidate wants to overturn Oliphant, or in the case of Alaska, the ANCSA. In this case, for the Violence Against Women Act, getting rid of the term Indian country so we protect all our sisters in Alaska. And of course, you know, charities. Donate your time, donate your money, but most importantly, speak out. You can find a way to be of service, and together we can make these statistics go down. So, Wado, thank you.
Oh, uh, thank you so much for speaking. I think all of your words have touched everybody here tonight, and there is so much that I learned, and I know Gwenna and some of our other Indigenous Peoples Club members have learned. And I just thank you, Chimegwich, for your time. I can't begin to express my gratitude for you coming to speak to us tonight. Um, So I think we took most of the rest of our time for questions. So if any of our audience members have any questions, there is the Q&A in the Zoom that we're in right now. If you want to type your questions and I'll ask your questions and see what can be answered. And while we wait for people to type their questions, I see you students out here tonight. And as DeLanna was saying, get involved if you want to help us fight this fight for Indigenous women and peoples. I mean, it's a big issue and it's happening in our community all around us. So join Indigenous Peoples Club, follow us on Instagram to see what we're doing, how you can help, and yeah, just how you can help, and you can donate your time. We're not asking you for any money. Just come to our meetings, see what you can do. If you have any ideas, you can send us an email, message us on Instagram, anything. We're here for your ideas and your support. So, all right. So I guess one question we have for you, DeLanna, is what change do you hope to see in the future in these next coming years? What steps do you hope that will be taken, and how can our youth in the future who will be running this country, what specifically do you want to see changed?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, you give me hope. Like you said, we met when you were, what, 3 months old? And so seeing you turn into this amazing woman that you are now gives me hope for our future. And so I just want to say thank you to this next generation of leaders. We're counting on you, and you're making us proud. I would like to see no more firsts. I would like to see, I call it a native in every room. Everyone talks about how representation matters, but we need a native person in every room, actually more than one native person in every room, but we need at least one in whatever field you're working in. We're slowly getting into office and running for political positions and winning, which is always good. I want to see more of the strong women I know. If you look at film and television and basic media, our women are always relegated to the background or being raped or murdered, and that's not the women I know. We have a lot of strong women. In fact, you can see that it's our women who are leading this fight for the MMIW. And so I want to see more strong women being acknowledged and having their voices amplified. I would like to see this no longer be an issue. I would like to know that our women are protected. I would like to have the jurisdiction of Oliphant overturned so that we have jurisdiction to prosecute anyone who comes onto our lands and mistreats or harms or murders our women, our children, our people. Because right now we don't have that right. And when we rely on the federal government or the state government or whoever's jurisdiction it happens to be in, even though it's ours, no one wants to take that case. And so I want to see that changed. And I want to see when these cases happen, want to see it on the media. Why isn't it publicized more? And so those are the changes I would like to see. Of course, I want to see an end to it all. But at the same time, I also want to acknowledge that our people are still here and that we have power. And I want to see more of that.
Okay, so it looks like another question that we got are there any films that portrayed natives appropriately, and what are some books and resources available for English/literature or history classes that are more historically correct?
Well, first off, if you see a film that was written by and directed by a native, Sidney Freeland, Sterling Harjo, that's going to be showing Native people as we are today. And that's what I consider appropriate. Even in the historical cases where they hire a consultant, seems to be what they're doing a lot in Hollywood these days, when they hire a consultant, sometimes it's just a Band-Aid. They like to say we hired a consultant. It doesn't mean they're going to take that consultant's advice. And so that's always something to know. And as regards to resources, I always say that if you go to the community, you'll find the resources. A lot of people like to find information about our people through history books. If you want to know the real story about who we are, go visit our elders, go to our tribal headquarters, go to our where we gather. You'll find the real story from our people. And in a lot of cases, we have heritage centers, we have tribal libraries, and there will be someone on hand that can point you in the right direction, especially to know about the people in your area. But I always say use the Native people as your primary resources.
So we are planning on showing this video to our entire student body. So are there any things in our like daily lives that you think we can change to be more supportive for all Indigenous peoples? Like, are there little things like, stereotypes and things you see every day, and even things that you see in the music, or not music, the movie industry, that you think we can change, being the future, just small little things that you wish were just gone and that can be changed?
Oh, there's so many small little things. I do feel like for a lot of minorities, it's a death by a thousand cuts, right? It's you have these microaggressions, and they eventually get to be so big that they weigh you down and they hurt. You can only brush so many things off. And so I also like to take this time to point out how important it is for us to band together and work together. I always use the example of the Native American mascot issue, especially with the Washington football team. We have been fighting that case in Supreme Courts and tribal courts, and for decades now, for at least 3, maybe 4. So for a very, very long time, and we've never. We made this a few little ends, but we never really got close to getting it changed. It always got sent back for appeals, this and that and the other. And it took Black Lives Matter amplifying that voice of ours when they were in Washington and saying, this is ridiculous. But it took them standing and voicing their voice with us to get that change. And if there's one thing I can say about what's happening in our current climate is we are so much stronger when we work together. And uplifting you and supporting your rights do not limit my rights. It's we can both have equal rights without losing anything in the event. And so that's one thing I like to talk about is, if you see something, say something. Don't be afraid to call it out. And I always like to say, acknowledge the impact, but assume the intent, right? So I would always assume good intent. I don't think people mean to be offensive. For some people, some people probably do, but a lot of people, they honestly don't know any better. And I'm not saying forgive them. I'm just saying assume they're coming from a good place, but acknowledge the impact of what they said on you. Say, I know you probably didn't mean it this way, but this is how I took it and this is what it did for me. I find that being able to have those conversations really clear up a lot of just a lot of misinformation that's out there. And so, yeah, so those, little things like that, the Native American mascot issue, good Lord, the jokes, the stereotypes about us, there's so many, and of course they vary from where you are to what you're doing. And just also learning about the Native people in your area and finding out, who they are and how you can be of service. You'll hear me say that a lot. Everything I do is in the spirit of Gadugi, which is a Cherokee word that means the coming together of a people to celebrate, promote, and support each other. And that's the only way we're going to survive this, is if we participate in that spirit of Gadugi and amplify and uplift each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone have any more questions? All right. Where can we find DeLanna online or on social media?
Um, Goodness. I think it's just my name. I want to say I'm at DeLanna Studi, DeLanna Studi. I also am the artistic director of Native Voices at the Autry. So if you really want to support Indigenous voices, follow Native Voices at the Autry or visit the Native Voices website. Native Voices is the only equity theater in the country that produces and develops new plays by Indigenous writers. And so we also do a lot of free readings, so you can see new Native talent and also hear Native stories told from Native people. And this is a way you can find out what issues are affecting our communities, because you'll hear it from our own voices in our own communities. And a lot of those readings are free. So while I appreciate the individual support, I always like to, and I'm getting embarrassed by it. Thank you. I also like to call attention to all the others that are doing work. And at Native Voices, we have so many talented Native artists that I would like to call attention to, and I want them to be household names. And how do we build them up? So that's one way you can do it.
Who would you say your Indigenous role model is? Like, we're talking about building everybody up. Who is your main person you want to build up and hype up and have everybody follow? And
Oh my goodness. There's so many. I'm just like, I'm overwhelmed right now. Well, role model for me is obviously my Uncle Wes. I'm sure he has plenty of followers, so don't worry about that. There was a TV show called Trickster. I don't know if you got to see that. But a lot of the leads were nominated for, it was the Canadian version of the Emmys. So I would say uplift those voices. You know, Crystal Lightning, Joel, Kalani Kwepo. There's so many in that series, Georgina Lightning, that are just fantastic. You know, celebrate anytime you see a contemporary Native person doing well. And of course, you know, these are artists and activists, and I bet there's so many people in your community who's doing something. You know, just find, you know, support the people that are doing the work, and also support the people who are doing the work and never get acknowledged. There's so many people who are working so hard behind the scenes. And, you know, I shared a lot of knowledge with you, but I'm not an attorney. I'm not, I work for a theater. I'm an actor. I'm a playwright. This is information I know because of the research I do. But there's so many people that are actually in this field, and lift them up. And I also want to say, lift up your elders. Learn from them. They are a precious resource, and they won't be here for very much longer. So learn their stories, learn the language, find out what life was like before, so that way you know what not to repeat, if that's helpful.
yeah, very helpful. I think, yeah, talking to just everybody, I think we can learn something from every person we talk to. And we learned a lot tonight for sure, but there's so much we can learn from each other that it's incredible. Um, so our next question is, can DeLanna talk about the play Kick?
Oh, yes. So KIC is how I got to know Wisconsin. In fact, we toured all the University of Wisconsin's, I want to say all of them, with KIC. So KIC is a one-person show that deals with Native American mascots. It was written by Peter Howard after doing over 200 interviews with people that were working in this issue. And in fact, there were two community members in Wisconsin that the play is based on. And one of them is my good friend Chris Munson. And so this was an issue that Chris has gone through. She fought against her school that had a Native American mascot. And it's that struggle. And of course, it's the story of, well, the way KIC is written is it shows 9 different perspectives about the mascot issue. And it's supposed to engage conversation. And there's a facilitated dialogue afterwards to help everyone unpack all the different perspectives that they heard. But I have to say, KIC is always going to hold a special place in my heart because it was my first professional theater job, and it's how I became a member of the union. And the last count, we had performed over 800 shows, and which is crazy. So that means we've reached thousands and thousands of people. Uh, I've been, like I said, I've been lucky enough to perform it across the United States and Canada, and also in Washington D.C. and at the California Capitol on one of their tables because they didn't have a stage. And it's a show that I hope continues until, of course, there are no more Native mascots, and then we don't have to tell that story. I'm probably the only actor that wants to work to put myself out of business.
Is there anywhere we can find this recording if we were interested in watching it as like our club or our school?
I know that okay. At one time, if you went to the Encompass website, and I think it was encompass.org, you could find excerpts from the play. So you would see different little scenes and segments. I don't think we've ever recorded the play in its entirety, just because it's a union. Well, we're not so. To my knowledge, we have not. People may have in the background recorded it, so you may be able to find like the pirated version out there, and feel free to watch it. But don't judge me because lighting's not good, and of course sound. But otherwise, watch it. It's a great story that needs to be told. But I would say go check out the Encompass website, and you'll find little excerpts from there. And I'll see if I have any people that happen to have recorded it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We'll see what we can find.
Awesome. So any more questions from our audience? Insert Jeopardy music here. And I mean, if not, DeLanna, is there anything you want to expand on, knowing that we're going to be showing this to all of our students? I mean, yeah.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to show up and listen, and to be open to hearing these statistics. I know they're hard to hear, but I'm a person that has hope. The reason why this piece was called Our Women's Hearts is because there's a Cheyenne proverb. I want to make sure I say it correctly. That says, the hearts of our women. Let me see if I have it on here. A nation is not conquered until the hearts of its women are on the ground. Then it is finished, no matter how brave its warriors or how strong their weapons. And that's a Cheyenne proverb. So a nation is not conquered until the hearts of its women are on the ground. And if there's one thing I can say about our Native women, is our hearts are nowhere close to being on the ground. We have a lot of fight left in us, and we will keep going. And I also want to take a moment to acknowledge you, Isabella. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this, and for this amazing organization that you're part of, and for getting the word out. I know it's hard work. I know it's difficult work. It's the work where the more you know, the more it weighs on you. But you are making a difference, and I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. You're such a role model in my life, so that really just means a lot. And I thank you for coming tonight. This is very important topics that we're talking about and trying to educate our community about. And I think having you here will really touch the hearts of all of our students, and hope we can really push forward and until no woman goes missing or murdered. So
Exactly. And please let me know how I can be a support of you and your community as well.
yeah, absolutely. And then for all of our participants, there will be a survey sent out just so that we can expand. Yeah, here's Mr. McDonald sending it out, so that we know how we can help you guys in the future, and how we can expand for next year and keep building on this momentum, and hope to get the word out. So Any last anything from the audience or DeLanna? Yeah, I guess we have a lot of thank yous and support. Chimegwich, you're amazing. We're so lucky to have had this experience with you, and I hope this video will be shared all the time in the future because it's very important and there's a lot of stuff we can learn from you. So
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And like I said, thank you all for listening. It's an issue that needs to be talked about more. So I appreciate it.
all right, well, thank you all of the audience members who came tonight. I hope you all have a great night. And I can't thank you enough, DeLanna. I've learned so much tonight and just yeah, I'm very just thrilled that we got to talk with you tonight. So
Wado, thank you. And thank you all.